over to you, Jan.
Yep. Give me a sec. Okay. Welcome to this Infoshare of the FIDELIS network of TDRs and the FIDELIS project. So this Infoshare is about sharing the observations that we've made during the consultancy period on considerations for a governance model and for a business model proposal for the FIDELIS network. Anja, could you please show the next slide? So we'll have the timing is a little bit, it's going to be a little bit different, I've seen, but we're going to have a little introduction to the business model proposal, followed by a very brief Menti, followed by an introduction to the governance considerations, followed by a Menti. And then there ought to be plenty of time for discussion. Next slide, please. Oh, one back. Yeah, just a quick reminder of what the FIDELIS project objectives are, right? FIDELIS, 3-year project. And the thing that we're here today for discussing is the first one, setting up, developing, and operating a network of trustworthy repositories to support development and growth of TDRs within the EOSC ecosystem. And keywords there are lightweight governance and a sustainable network. And we aim to build in that sustainability from the start. So for that purpose, we set out earlier this year to start working on what are the elements of such a governance proposal and what are the key elements of such a business model proposal. 2 documents were out for consultation, and they have already been discussed quite a bit actually in various circumstances, network meetings, other types of meetings. We're now kind of like at the end of that period for this. So this is where we try to sum up. And at the end of this Infoshare, I'll highlight some next steps. And then I think it is over to you, Tobias, to give us a quick walk around of the business model proposal.
Yeah, perfect. I guess you have the slides in this presentation, so I'll just continue. Yeah. So we are at the end of the deadline for delivery of the report for the business model. We've done some slight changes to it. So the first changes you will see is the headline. It's called a proposed business model, business propositions for the FIDELIS network. So where are we? I think we presented the business propositions in both network meeting 2 and 3 also. But last time we presented the entire report or the process we've done was in network meeting 2, which was in September. After September, we've had a couple, 3 different consultations and review processes. We've had feedback sessions from project partners. We've had a community consultation. We've sent out the report to the network members, and it's been possible to comment directly into the document. We've had great comments, I would say. We've also had a project review, and now, or on Friday, we sent the final report to PMO review, which is a project management office review. So that's the last review before it's being published. Let's skip to the next slide. I'll quickly run through some of the feedback we've gotten through these steps, and then I'll do a quick run through of the business propositions at the end before we do a quick Menti. So after the feedback from the project partners, we got comments on the report being a bit more centered on the propositions and not the business model as a whole. So that's the change we've done. We've tried to to center the report around the propositions and not calling it a finalized business model. Because to call it a business model, I think we need to test these three propositions through the next couple of years to get a bit more data. And that's a part of that will also be cost and a cost to develop the different activities we'll do in the network. We also have to define the gap that the network fills. So that's something we'll focus on in the next couple of years. And they wanted us to describe the way forward in the report. They also commented that we should try to force the members to give a clear response, and that the response we've gotten through the second network meeting might be up for discussion. So that's something we'll try to do at the end today. Next slide is the project review. We've gotten mainly positive feedback through the project reviews. That's from 2 reviewers. They wanted us to emphasize, as well as the previous slide, emphasize the business propositions and not the business model. So we changed the headline and we changed the introduction slightly. And they commented that they wanted a bit clearer structure and easier readability. So we've done that also. And then we had the community consultation. We've done some small changes after that, like calling it emerging and established networks instead of small and large. And we also were reminded to keep the document a bit more high level. And it's also been a lot of great comments on writing errors and improvements in language. That's good. So I think that's the feedback we've gotten. So I'll just do a quick run through of the business propositions once more. You have probably heard them before, but these are the propositions as they stand today with some slight changes. Business proposition 1 is called specialist training, shared knowledge and resources. The proposition offers more formal training. So the training we offer here has to be formalized. There's more structure, and it should provide access to high quality resources that are governed by the network. It also supports alignment with the standards, and shared challenges is discussed in the network. And it should strengthen capacity to implement the trust principles for the network members. Proposition 2, which is on the next slide, is called a collaborative network for peer learning and shared solutions. And this one is informal. So that's the main difference between proposition 1 and 2. This one is informal. The first one is formal. What it does is that it facilitates informal peer learning and collaboration. It connects emerging and established repositories, bridges disciplines, reduces duplication, and boosts visibility of members. I think the difference between the 2 propositions is important to emphasize, and it's also important to be aware of for the governing members of the network. We've gotten some feedback on that this sounds like just basic building blocks for a network. But really, we believe that for the governing entity, this has to be taken into consideration while we are setting up the network, which one of these 2 propositions to focus on. Because making a network where members are actively participating requires another mindset than setting up a network where members can be passive listeners or observers. The last proposition is amplified impact through collective position. Earlier, we've talked about this being a proposition where we take political stance. We've gone away from that and rather talking about collective positions. So the network should act as a collective voice. It should promote trustworthy repositories, should boost visibility and credibility, and amplify impact for the entire network through its negotiating power. And yeah, we've also got some next steps. The report is to be published by the end of the year. For the next couple of years, we're going to test these three propositions iteratively. They may be tested in parallel because we've got other activities in the network that we can team up with and get data from. We have to test the cost and revenue structures. In December 2026, we're going to deliver a sustainability plan. And in 27, we have to have a post-project budget plan in place. So all of the activities we're doing should end up in these two deliverables. So to end, I have a Menti, and I think I have to share my screen for that to work. And I have to send a request to be allowed to share. There we are, I think. Jan, can you give a thumbs up or down?
Yeah,
perfect.
It works.
Perfect. Okay, so we want you to...
Could you share the QR code again?
I can do that also. Do you see the presentation now, or do you still see the Menti screen?
This is the presentation screen.
This is the presentation. Yeah.
That worked, thanks.
I'll keep it up for 20 seconds more, and then we'll go to the Menti. That's probably enough time. And then I need to hide my meeting controls.
Excuse me, can you put up the code again?
The QR code. You can also use
not the code, this code here, yeah.
Yeah, you can also use this code. So the first question is, if the network could focus on only one of the three propositions, which one would you choose? Let's see, we have 22 respondents and 14 have responded. So we'll allow a bit more time. Yeah, seems like it's getting a bit more quiet. So I think we'll go on. Yeah, That's interesting. It's seems like it's about the same response as we've gotten through the other Menti questionnaires we've done and the other insights we've gathered. The last question is, how will you rank the three propositions in order of priority? So the network might evolve through all of these three propositions, but we wanted to rank them so that we know which one to focus on first and which one to focus on last. Are you able to? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, seems like it's beginning to quiet down again. This also confirms our idea of the ranking. So that's really interesting. Thank you so much for helping us with this insight. Then I'll try to find the Zoom meeting again. Which isn't that easy.
Could you stop sharing?
Yeah, but I need to find the Zoom meeting first.
Okay. Are there any?
Which is easier said than done.
Yep. Are there any questions to Tobias on the business model or on the feedback that was given? So later on in this meeting, we'll have like more space for a more coherent discussion on both topics. But are there any questions at this point in time? I don't see any hands. I don't see anyone unmuting. Okay. Then I suggest, I see a thumbs up. Then I suggest. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, you raised a hand.
Yeah, I raised the hand. Sorry, I
Okay.
mixed up the reactions. Hi. I have a question to the proposition 2. So it includes the shared solutions, but on the other hand, you say that it's informal. Now, shared solutions to me, it seems to me something that people have to also commit to use. And I don't know what exactly the shared solutions should be, whether it's, software, hardware solutions, or just, I don't know exactly what that should be. So maybe you can elaborate on that, and how does it compare to informal structure of the network?
Yeah. So the idea behind shared solutions is that the network should empower the members to come together and create shared solutions to address similar challenges. So the difference here is between 1 and 2 is that in proposition 1 you have a set of let's call them best practices or things that you've created together, but which is formal. But number 2 is members coming together. So the network empowers members to come together to address similar challenges. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I think
it's a little bit confusing, I must
Matthias,
say.
I think maybe a way to describe it is in the first business proposition, there would effectively be money available to pay a team to do certain things for the network. In the second scenario, it would be in-kind contributions by network members to establish that. And
why don't we write it this way, that it's much simpler to understand?
Yeah, that's a good comment, and we'll look into that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yep, and this is how this is built, right? Slowly over multiple iterations. And I think the importance of doing this business modeling exercise is that when we do have to draft up our sustainability plan, we have a good way of talking about these issues and a good understanding of the different options that we have.
Yeah, I think it's important being clear about that this first report is a proposition. It's a spark to make things happen throughout the second or third project year. But it's really good feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then I suggest we continue with Ingrid on the governance considerations.
Sure, thanks very much. Can we have the next slide? I don't know who's controlling the slide deck at the moment, but
Anya, it's not me.
So hi everyone. Unfortunately, the main author of this piece of work couldn't make it today, so I'll do my best. But I'm also going to try to be very brief because I think it's important that we let you speak and not for us to speak too much. So similar to the business model proposal, also with respect to the governance proposal, we are looking at an iterative and ongoing process. And I think we are in the middle of it, not near the end yet with respect to the governance proposal. I think the overall goal that we want to achieve is that we create a network that is able to outlive the project timeline that we have with the FIDELIS project. And we need to figure out how we can do it to make, how we should shape this network to make that possible, or to at least have a chance that we can outlive the project time. So we want to create something lightweight, and we want to do that in a democratic way with a lot of community consultation, and also, of course, a strong consultation amongst the provisional members of the network. We are now nearly at a version 1 of the governance proposal, and I thank you very much for all the comments that you have added to the document and also given us in earlier instances. That led to several rewrites and revisions of the documents in which we tried to bring together the different opinions and expertise. Again, this is a version 1. We have 2 more project years to go to further test this in practice and also refine the governance model. We decided, I think, very early on in the project that 3 important keywords with respect to the shaping of this governance model are inclusivity, transparency, and simplicity. So these are, let's say, the cornerstones on which we try to build this model. For those of you who weren't able to go through the document, here you see the content. So we talk a little bit about the likely network activities. Membership is a big part of the document where we describe different options. We also talk about the different governance bodies that you could imagine to be part of the network. And we talk about legal and hosting considerations. What is already clear from the various discussions that we have had is that there are 3 areas where we have multiple options and where it is also important that we take certain decisions. And the first of these, and that's on the next slide, is all the questions around membership. So membership criteria, you could say. Here you see a couple of points that already popped up in earlier discussions. So when we talk about repositories, do we then say that the organization hosting the repository becomes the member? Or in case an organization has multiple repositories, do we want all of these separate repositories to become a separate member of the network? That is one distinction that we need to solve. Another issue is about umbrella organizations and individual repositories. Now, you will know that we have organizations like CESDA and Clarin who have repositories amongst their membership. But these umbrella organizations might also want to join the network. So how do we deal with these? Do we say the umbrella organization represents all the members? Do we say the different member repositories get a reduction on a potential fee? So we need to figure out what the relationship between these two should be, not only with respect to fees, but only, for example, with respect to voting in the network. Then there is the question about wider stakeholders. The idea is that we create a network of trustworthy digital repositories. So you would imagine it's the repositories that are the members. And this is a project in the context of EOSC. So probably only EU-based repositories could be a member, but do we want others from the other parts of the world also to be part of our discussions, for example, as observers? And another point is we have also stakeholders, for example, technical service providers, or maybe funders are interested. Would we want them to be able to obtain an observership? So these are also important questions. And then finally, I'm sorry, my furry assistant is moving in. I'm going to put him away. He doesn't have to add much to the discussion. The final point around membership options is the maturity level. We say that we want to become the network of TDRs, but what does that T mean? Does that mean that all the repositories need to have a formal certification? But that wouldn't add up with our inclusivity point of view. So do we keep it as we have it now for the provisional members, saying you only have to adhere to the FAIR principles and the trust principles? Or do we want to change that in some shape or form? So these are the questions, the knots we need to untie around membership. Then the second area is around what I would call the minimum viable network. So I think if we want a network that is able to outlive the project time, we need to start with, in the simplest way possible. That goes back to the simplicity building block. And that would mean a secretariat for sure, because we need probably some kind of online presence. We need membership administration. We need a communication with the membership and probably also with the outside world. So that is really, to my mind, the minimal core that we need to be able to uphold after the project. And that comes with questions. So first question would be, would this minimum viable product need a separate legal entity or not? A legal entity comes with a lot of fuss, but the moment you start to ask fees from members, you need a bank account and thus you need a legal entity. So how do we deal with that? And the second point related to that is, do we want the network to stand on its own feet? Or do we think that it would be better and maybe also easier to have the network hosted by, for example, one of the members or by an entity outside of the network? And that is also related to the legal entity point, because you could imagine that maybe a host is also willing to give their bank account for the network and have a separate finance administration. So these are very practical things that we need to really figure out. Here you see a little overview of the feedback that we have received so far. This is just like a random overview, but if you look at the wording, you see that all these three areas where we need to untie the knot are represented. Big versus small repositories, network inclusivity, the need for simplicity. Is it certification we go after, or what do we do with the maturity levels? Legal entity questions, the role of an umbrella organization, voting rights, etc., etc. So it is clear that also in the community, the same questions arise as we also figured out while talking about this in the network and in the project. And here I think I'm going to stop and hand over to Jan to lead us through the discussion, because it's important that we hear your voice.
Yeah, would you prefer to run the Menti on the governance while we have the discussion?
Yes, if you give me 2 seconds to screen share on my end.
Yeah, so while So there's a couple of Menti questions on these governance issues that there is currently no consensus on. While we wait for that, and while you answer them, I think we want to leave that Menti open for a little while after the meeting, so you don't have to answer at this point in time. But so Ingrid presented like 3 knots that we have to untie in order to actually come to a consolidated governance proposal. Is there anyone who would like to comment anything, discuss, ask?
Yes.
I heard a voice, Francoise. Yes.
Yes, I am sorry. I am old. So now I see the code. I was not seeing the Menti code. I am old enough to use codes instead of QR codes. Thank you.
I think we can begin, Jan, if you want. I'll go to the next question, next slide.
Yep. Yeah, so should membership be defined on the level of a repository or an institution? At the moment, we see in the preliminary current membership that it is typically done as a repository, and you see organizations that have multiple memberships.
Can I ask a question to this?
Of course. That is the whole purpose why we're here.
So if it may be necessary that the repository joins as an institution. So for example, in our case, the repository is not a legal entity. We are not even a unit within the university structure. And therefore, if the network requires a legal entity to join, then we may need to join as an institution, not as a repository.
Matthäus, I don't think that the idea about legal entity is that the members of the network should have their own legal entity. It is about the network itself, whether it should have its own legal entity or not. So there's no problem with you, even if you are a small department within a department of a part of a university, you can still become a member.
Okay, then this would be perfect. But I know it from other structures that this is really not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but it's a bit the question, whom do you consider a member? You have organizations that have multiple repositories, and do they then have multiple memberships? Does that make sense? Paul, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing about being a legal entity is the ability to receive grants. So the ability to receive money. And for example, if the network wanted as a network to apply for Horizon money, for example, you'd have to be a legal entity. And so although you could in principle invest the network under the legal aegis of a particular university or national institution, that would require a pretty well-established relationship between and commitment from that institution to actually take the network under its wing. Otherwise, I think there's the only way to get money from Horizon program, for example, would be to be an independent legal entity.
I think you're completely right. I think that is the main, that would be the main motivator to set up a legal entity or to find a legal entity with a host. But that is complicated to find a host who is willing to do that, especially if you dive into project funding, because it becomes very complicated.
Yeah.
No,
so I think that's the overwhelming reason to look for legal entity status.
Do you have an opinion on its desirability?
I think it's very desirable to get money.
Or to have the ability to get money. No, that's
it's kind of fundamental, and this is the only way to get money. Particularly as it's a transnational organization, and transnational organizations have a lot of challenges in getting funding because individual national organizations, funding agencies will fund databases, for example, and resources within their own country. But actually getting funding for something which is transnational is notoriously hard. And there are very few institutions which will actually do that. So I don't think there's much alternative really. Money's good.
Okay. Let's see. I suggest we go to the next Menti question. Should membership be open for umbrella organizations? Yes, no, unsure. And should that, yeah. Right. So I think so far we see the picture confirmed that we've had from the interaction so far, that there is not yet consensus on this particular topic. Does anyone want to make a comment about this particular topic or voice a viewpoint? Françoise?
Yes, I think this membership capacity depends a lot on the role they would have in the network. So it's not an absolute yes or no, but yes if or no if eventually. You know, if we have as a basis of a network that this is a network of repositories, and it is my strong opinion here because I think it lacks in the landscape, then membership, if we are inclusive, we should not throw away membership organizations or eventually call them specific networks, because, for instance, in RDA France, we also network the repositories which are willing to learn about certification. And so I think there could be the possibility to be a member because you are an umbrella of something, or a sub-network of something. And I think this would be acceptable and open not only to umbrella organizations, but to networks which network the repositories for a specific reason, either national or thematic.
Okay, thanks for that. Martin?
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted in a way, because on the one hand, if there is a good umbrella organization like Cesta, Clarin, Elixir, or the like, then having all the repositories separately in this network seems a little bit like duplicating things. But on the other hand, I recognize that there are a lot of repositories around that don't have umbrella organizations. And so that's why I'm inclined to say I think both should be possible. And like François said, it should be sort of, we should have an idea of what the relation between the two are and the roles. But I'm inclined to say, yes, it would be good if, say, Clarin could be a member, and then me as a Clarin member can decide whether I want to be part of this network directly or indirectly, so to say.
Yeah, François, you want to reply to that?
Yes, I think that one of the strong aims is to share about difficulties. And so I know that you do that in your networks, but I think listening to what happens in other thematic domains, I already said that in a previous meeting, but I will repeat it as long as I think it's useful. To open the eyes of people about what happens in other disciplinary fields is a very good thing to do, because it can bring new ideas. And I know the umbrella organization is doing its work properly, and it's not the point, but the individuals, if they listen to others, they will learn something for themselves also.
Yeah, and I guess this is the difference between having a network totally focused on the business of trustworthy repositories versus networks that also have a lot of other things to concentrate themselves on. Okay, then there is a question about potential membership fees. Should they be staggered according to the size of the repository umbrella organizations, or should they be flat? Right, and membership fees is one of the most obvious routes to establish the minimum viable network over time. So this is actually a quite important point for us to get some input on. Okay. And how would we then measure the repository size is then the follow-up question, right? I know in other networks, you measure by GDP. Martin.
Yeah, this leads a little bit to the discussion. Should there be an entity in the first place, or can we use existing organizations? But I guess that's a bigger discussion. So I still haven't quite understood why we can't, for example, use the EOSC association or be using existing organization to manage this network.
That's an open question at this point, right? Piggybacking on someone else is an option. Whether the EOSC association is a good framework for that or not, unsure. But in any case, if you want to do some activity, also if you're hosted somewhere, that hosting organization is going to ask, well, and how am I going to recover the cost that I'm making for keeping your minimum viable network running? And maybe someone is willing to give that as an in-kind contribution, but quite likely not. I think we have all the responses we're going to get on this, and I don't see any hands raised. No additional input on this particular topic. Okay. Should repositories outside Europe be welcome to the network as observers? And we actually have an example of that from Canada. Right, and this is the choice. Do you create a network mostly focused on Europe and the joint legal and policy framework that our repositories operate in? Okay, that seems to be a pretty Françoise. Is that an old hand or a new?
It's a new one.
Okay.
If I may. I think I am strongly in favor. There is no, so I am in favor of that. I think that we have to understand if there are additional costs or human resources needed to manage external repositories which are not in Europe. So I think it's part of a discussion about how this works and what we do and so on. Because we will do things which are basically in the European context. And do we want to expand to understanding the context in Canada, for instance, which is different? And this will have a cost in terms of work to do the job. So I think it has to be included in the discussion.
Yep. Okay. Noted. Well, one practical consideration is that if you actually try to organize a meeting with people from all over the world, time zone wise, that is going to be much more complicated. Yep, and that is the other interesting thing we observed with the provisional membership. We have a couple of members that are not TDRs, but can be classified as technical service providers. And the question is, should we welcome them as observers? Or should the network really be limited to repository only? or should they be welcomed as members? Okay, it does seem that there is consensus on this. Anja, do you remember how many questions we still have? I think we're approaching the end.
We have 2-3 more, so we'll be quick.
Okay. This is the
maturity level 1.
The maturity level. Yeah, and there in previous discussions, opinions that were voiced encompassed. This is a network of trustworthy repositories and not just any repositories. So that's kind of like what sparked this particular question. And the question is endorsement of the trust principles sufficient to be able to make that claim, or should there be stronger requirements? Okay, in this group, there does seem to be a certain amount of consensus on that particular topic. Because the pragmatic way forward can always be that you say we start with the few requirements, the endorsement of the trust and fair, and then add requirements as becomes required or deemed appropriate. Yeah, I remember the time where open, friendly discussion and accepting different opinions was kind of like the default. But I understand that these days we need a code of conduct for that. The legal entity question. Paul already phrased it very succinctly. That creates the opportunity for the network to independently gather funding. And if you don't have a legal entity, then that's going to be much more difficult. I think that is probably the key difference between having it and not having it. Yep. That's also what we assume, that we can collect member fees without the network being a legal entity. But of course, you need a legal entity because in order to gather anything, you need a bank account. But that could be part of hosting this network secretariat. Okay, that does seem to be a slight preference in a certain direction. That was the last question.
Yeah, that's the last one we had.
Mm-hmm.
This is for the open consultations. They want to contribute to the working documents.
Yeah. So I think this whole process has helped us a step further in the direction of a sustainability proposal and in the direction of a governance proposal. You have any reflections to add, Ingrid?
No, I was just answering to a question about how we measure the endorsement of the trust and fair principles. And in all honesty, we don't measure the endorsement of the fair principles. We do measure the endorsement of the trust principles because you can officially endorse them through the RDA. There is a special web page, so you can tick the box there, and then we get a message about that. And we also said that for provisional members, that is that you need to do that within 4 months of applying for your provisional membership. So that is the current status.
Yeah. So a couple of words on next steps. So the business propositions, that is a formal project deliverable, and that is now going through the motions and will be submitted. And that's kind of like the starting point for the work ahead towards a sustainability plan. We're also consolidating all the information and learnings we've gathered about considerations for governance proposal in another deliverable at this moment. We're going to take that as a starting point for the plan ahead. There is a network meeting on the 16th of December where we would like to discuss that plan ahead. We're pretty sure that the plan ahead includes integrating the Fidelis project activity more with the network, because there is already quite a lot of activity going on regarding harmonization, regarding support and training. And we're imagining that we would like to establish a small network members working group tasked with pushing the governance proposal forward, or giving input on and kind of like resolving the issues where we need to make a decision in a final proposal. In March, the project states that we shall have a network roadmap, strategy, and work plan. So the project will provide for that. And in August, there should be the first membership general assembly. So that's kind of like when the governance model needs to be in place. And next year, at the close of the year, there needs to be an accepted sustainability plan so that we can use the year after that in order to actually transition the network from a project activity to a self-sustaining activity. Martin.
Yeah, I would like to ask, you mentioned that you think EOSC Association would not be a good sort of home for this network. And I wonder why not, seeing as at the moment, for example, EOSC is also pushing for EOSC nodes, where they have a working group about trusted repositories that's very similar to what we're discussing here. And I also know that Daria has a working group about trusted repositories. And of course, then you have the already mentioned networks of Clarincesta and so on. So I'm really a bit skeptical about having your own legal entity with all the overhead that brings it with it, when there are actually organizations that basically could be easily, in my opinion, accommodate this network, because it's very similar what they are working on anyway.
Maybe
Ingrid?
I can respond. Well, to my mind, the groups that we now have, so the Federation Build-Up Group and the working groups and task forces and open, opportunity area expert groups, are very much groups of volunteers that are completely open for everybody. The opportunity area expert groups are focused on cross-project collaboration, so that is different from what we, I think, aim to achieve with this network. And it's also different, I think, from the working groups, because they focus on issues like the long-term data retention group, for example, at the moment. And I think we are looking for more... The network is a group representative of a stakeholder group. So that is not so much, I think, captured in these options that the EOSC Association has at the moment. We've had some discussions already with them, but I think if we would set up something like an opportunity area expert group or a working group, that would not be the place where we can do the work that we envisage for the network, and certainly not the being the voice for the repositories. So I really think that in terms of goals and membership, that there is quite some difference there. I mean, that doesn't mean that we can't have the discussion with the EOSC Association to see whether we can add this network to their portfolio of groups. But I don't see the current formats that they have available for groups now so much fitting for what we try to achieve with the network, which is really, to my mind, also stakeholder representation.
Yeah, Martin, you want to respond?
Can't we influence that in because I mean, after all, on this slide, EOSC is, I mean, we are part of the EOSC project. So I'm not saying that everything is already in place and nothing needs to be done from Fidelis. That's what wasn't my point. My concern is just that, for example, creating a legal entity where then all the organizations that are already in the EOSC association need to again join this organization as well. That takes time, financing, and there's also the risk that then some organizations say, hey, we are already there, why do we have to be here? And then they won't take part, and then the whole idea gets sort of watered down. And that's a little bit my concern. I mean, yes, you need to be an entity for funding, but you also might not get funding because other entities are already in place, and we're cannibalizing each other. And I don't really understand why we can't influence, for example, EOSC instead of creating a separate institution.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I understand also your worry about that. We have started the discussion with the EOSC Association, so we have those discussions, and let's see where that leads.
Yeah, but this would be piggybacking on someone else's legal entity, right? And then the EOSC Association might not be such a bad fit if they could create an instrument that accommodates this particular way of working. Because at the moment, they don't really have it. Any last questions or comments? No hands raised, no one unmuted. Okay, then I would like to thank everyone for your